Hello everyone, welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today we're going to actually paint Karak, the board game miniature set. And this is a game from Aldi. I think it's a Czech producer if I'm not mistaken, or Czech publisher if I'm not mistaken. And this is a dungeon crawler for families most of all, but anyone can pretty much play it. I don't have the game right now with me, but Karak the board game looks absolutely amazing. It came out in 2017, and Karak 2, which is the sequel, is coming out this year in Essen Spiel, and I'm going to try and pick it up. Now, the original game has these standees, plastic standees, or paper plastic standees, and this is kind of like an upgrade pack to this one. So it gives you really cool figures to actually to paint or actually to play with. And we're going it comes with 6 of them in this box set, and I'm going to paint 3 of them today, and the other 3 will be painted at a later stage. And just to show you that I've actually primed these miniatures beforehand with priming them in white and black, and I'm going to show you the 3 miniatures we're going to be painting today. One of them is going to be called Horan the Warrior, and the other one is actually called Argentis the Wizard. Looks quite cool. And the last one that we're painting today is called Victorious the Swordsman. And I'm going to be painting most of these figures using contrast paints, contrast speed paints. And if you don't know what these things are, please check out my tutorial for these really beautiful paints in the description box below. But with that said, let's get into the actual painting. So I'm going to focus my camera here a little bit down, so you can see it. Oh, there we go. And we're going to actually start with this one called Horan the Warrior. I'm only using the card art for these ones, so I'm going to be painting this one with a color called Natural Steel from Vallejo. Let's see if I can turn this camera up a little bit more so you can get some more focus. Hopefully it will stay there. Let's see that. Let's see here if you can see this one. It looks really beautiful. So I'm going to use it quite diluted with a bit of water. I'm going to put it out here in my palette so you can see. And this is very thick and grimy looking paint, and he's very easy to paint actually, this guy, because he is pretty much one solid guy who's like lots of metal. Diluting it about 50% water to make sure that it's nice and flowy on the miniature and doesn't really clog it up. And allows for the drying time to actually be sped up as well. Now this one here is, and I'm going to pretty much cover the entire miniature. Oh, there we go, the camera went down a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to cover the entire area except for parts of the handle of the axe, as well as the inner sides here of the armor, which are going to be painted in dark brown. But we're going to cover the entire miniature with this paint. And as you can see, it looks quite nice when you put it on. Make sure that you get a good coverage of the entire figure. And if you think this one looks way too dark and grimy, you're right, but we are going to highlight it up in a couple of stages later on. One thing to be said about metal colors, it's really hard to actually paint them with contrast paints because they are so metallic, so to say. I'm also not painting the horns here, but this one gives it and if you do really want contrast paint with this one, you can make your own, and that means you will simply take the metallic paint that you choose, and you will actually put it with 50% Nuln Oil or black wash, or the choice of wash that you want to use, and that will give it a good coverage. But I haven't experimented with these much, so there's only what I can say that I've heard of other people doing. And painting the helmet. And you can be quite liberal here with the paint, as we're going to cover this one with some Nuln Oil as well in the end. Make sure that you cover every area here. as well as its armor here on his thighs. And don't forget the axe blade as well. I've covered this one with a black primer. You can cover it in a lighter color if you want to, but black is really good for metallic colors because it gives it some shadow and definition. And don't forget there are some here underneath the axe. It can be a bit fiddly, but with a little bit of practice you can actually get going with it quite easily. The boots will be painted brown, so if you cover them with the metallic paint, don't worry about it. It will be fixed. And this is what it looks like when you covered most of it for the metallic paint. And for the brown areas, I'm going to use Rhinox hide from Citadel. I'm using this one fairly, you can use it both diluted and undiluted. I'm using it undiluted just for now because I wanted a good coverage. And we're covering the horns with this one. Both the back and the front, of course. As well as the handle of the axe. But not the tip of the handle, that will be covered with metallic paint. If you missed that before, make sure that you cover it now. As well as now, as you said, the boots. As well as the inside of the, kind of like the arms here. According to the color of the card art, it could be left black as well, but I wanted a little bit of different color just to give it a nice contrast. Just turn it around, and you'll paint the back side of the boots here as well. And if you feel that it's getting a little bit too fiddly to get it in between here, don't forget that you can always correct this one at a later stage. The goal here is, sorry about that, goal of the game is not to get it perfect, just to make sure that it looks fairly okay on the tabletop. Alright, with that one done, let's move in and make some small corrections before we leave it to dry and move on to the next figure. So this one can dry thoroughly and properly. Now, I thought here we missed the tip of the axe, as well as the axe blade over here as well, we missed. And we can cover this mistake up here as we made as well. Alright, that concludes the first stage of Horan the warrior. We'll put him aside over here, so he won't be lonely and he won't be feeling cross, because you don't want to cross this warrior. He is a phenomenal warrior to have on your side. Now, with that said, let's get into the next stage and paint Argentus. Argentus is a wizard, and he's fairly straightforward. If you primed him in white and then gave him a good white coverage with some white paint or some grey-white from Vallejo, you will actually feel that this one can be a very easy piece to paint. So make sure that your brush is clean before you move to the next stage. And this one is, we're going to use a contrast paint called, here on the side, called Apothecary White. I hope I pronounced that right. Give it a really good shake and make sure that you can So no, not all of the pigment stays in the bottom. You will cover pretty much the entire miniature with this one, with the exception of the staff handle and the kind of like orb over here. Not the sword, of course, not the belts, and not the face. So give it a good shake. And this one, since it's a contrast paint, you apply it undiluted. You could also apply a very light cover of Nuln Oil mixed with water over this miniature as well. But I'm going to use this one as well because I want it to have a fairly greyish look. And you want this one to pool in all the recesses, just like you do with the wash. As you can see here, I'm painting over the belt, but I will correct it in a bit. This is a nice paint to use if you want to paint, say, stormtroopers from Star Wars, or other figures that are fairly white, and you wanted to give it a little bit more different contrast than the white that you normally would paint them on. It also tends to blend into the figure really well. And of course the inside of his cloak or cover here, make sure that you get that too. As well as all the folds on his sleeves. Don't forget the back ones. Then you can, if you want to, you can paint the hair with the same way. I'm going to use another color, and I'm going to use Nuln Oil that I will dilute with a large amount of water. So it's almost like a very, very thin wash as it is. You can also use Vallejo's black wash here as an alternative. Give it a good shake. And you do, for example, you do something like 1 part Nuln Oil or wash and 6 to 7 parts water. So it's a very, very light wash, and you do that over the head here. Just to, you can barely see it, but it's like to make sure that it's designed to give some shadow and definition for the beard and his hair. Not leave it entirely white. Now with that one done, let's turn our attention to the staff and the sword. Make sure you wash your brush in between. Now for the staff, I've chosen to use, there it is, contrast Wyldwood from Citadel Colour. Give it a good shake because it's a contrast paint. And again, apply it undiluted on the staff. You can also use it on the belt if you like. And if you get it on some of the hands or the cloth, it's not a problem. We can fix that later on as well as we go. Fairly fluid paint, so it's going to happen. And you can do that on the belt as well. Make sure that you hold the brush very close to the bristle here for more control. If you don't like the contrast color, an alternative to this one could be Mournfang Brown or Rhinox Hard from Citadel. And you can also see that he has some kind of like leather bracelet up here or something similar. Alright, and of course you can paint the scabbard of the sword with this one as well. Don't forget the back. As well as the sword belt over here as well. Alright, now you can see that it's already starting to look quite okay. If If you miss some spots on the way, just turn your figure around and see if you do, and you can easily see if you spot something, alright, that you made a mistake. Okay, now we're going to turn our attention to the sword, and for the sword we're going to use the same colours we used with Horan the Warrior, namely natural steel from Vallejo, which I already have diluted here and ready, as the paint didn't have time to dry yet. So a small bit of this. And you can use it on the sword handle here as well, and the pommel. Turn it around, pommel here, the rest of the sword, and the sword handle. You can also paint this alternatively with a color like gold or a chainmail silver as well. That will also be acceptable. Alright, now with this one done, let's turn our attention to the face. Face will be painted with a armor painter color called, let's turn our attention to this one, called Crusader Skin from Armor Painter. You could also use a speed color or a contract color of your choice from Citadel. Dark Oath Flesh would be acceptable. And you paint the hands and the face with this one. Make sure that you angle the figure like this, and you only paint the facial features because he has some kind of like metal or silverish band in on his forehead that we're going to paint some silver afterwards. Something like this. And his hand over here that's grabbing his sword, ready to go fight the monsters in the dungeons of Castle Jordan, where the character board game, the first one from 2017, is set. You lay tiles in front of you, you find treasures, you find monsters, and you conquer them, and eventually you will conquer the dragon, and whoever has the most points at the end of the game, which is given by treasures and others, will win Karak the board game. Now, I forgot one thing here before, and that was his boots. And his boots can also be painted in the same contrast color as I did before, which is contrast Wyldwood. Of course, applying it undiluted. Right, that is our dentist, the wizard. As you notice, I forgot the orb here as well, and I'm going to paint that last when the paint has actually had time to dry. And so I'm going to put this one to side here again, and I'm going to focus our attention on the last figure before we go into the highlight stage, and that is Victorious the Swordsman. Really beautiful figure. We're going to start by painting his sword with the same oily steel as we did with Horan and Argentis. So let's start with this one. Make sure that your paint brush is entirely dry before you start. If you think it's a bit too fluid, like in this case, Wait until it's dry and apply a thick coat of undiluted. And turn it around and see if you can get it in between here as well. It doesn't do much if you don't, but I like to cover the figure with everything is in no white or none of the primers showing, especially the tip here in the front. Okay, you need this one to dry just for this one. And now we're going to turn our attention to the helmet and the shield, which I will be painting in a gold color. In this case, I've chosen one of the best colors, gold colors on the market, called Retributor armor from Citadel. I'll apply it undiluted. You can apply it with slight dilution if you want to. You cover the entire shield with this one, as well as the helmet. And yeah, helmet and his shield. Don't forget to turn it around. Paint the back side as well. Already looking a bit better. Apply some more paint. And while we're painting, if you played Karak the board game, which is your favorite figure? Do you prefer melee? Do you play it with your families, your kids? Now turn attention to the helmet. Don't turn any attention to the insides of where the eyes are, because that's going to be painted in a whole different color. And the brush I'm using here is a size 3 brush from Winsor Newton and Cotman series. It's a synthetic brush, and I really like it. I put a little bit more paint on my brush. And since I'm going to Essen this year, Essen Spiel, if you want some tips on how to navigate the convention as well as how to prepare for it, there is a brand new video up describing exactly that. Top 7 tips for Essen. Check it out. It's one of the best fairs in the world. I really enjoy going to Essen every year. I've been going every year since 2016, except for the years in 2020 when we had Corona and the fair was a digital kind. Don't forget the inside of the shield over here. You can paint it brown as well if you want to. Always trying to get the inside of the shield here. You can't see it here on the camera. I'm going to try and show it afterwards. Alright, well, that's one done. I'm going to turn our attention to the legs and the arms, as well as arms, fingers and facial details. I'm going to paint this with the color that we did before, which is Armor Painter's Crusader skin. And I'm washing my brush here, that's the sound you hear. Start with the upper body here. Make sure that you don't cover the entire arm because he has some kind of bracelet here of some sort. turning it around. Something like this for the arm. Now going over it, let's go and touch the legs. And his knees. Other way around as well. Not all the way down because he's wearing some kind of leather armor in the bottom, which we will cover in a bit. Let's turn it upside down and get all the angles in of this beautiful color. If you feel it's pooling too much, just go over it with a damp brush and you'll be fine. Now the facial details will be covered over here. Only the mouth and the chin over here, as well as the underside of the neck, will be painted with this color. Don't forget the other side of the arm, as well as the arm behind the shield. And is also where he's holding the shield here. If you covered it in gold, not a problem. You can paint it over like this. And this is part here of the shoulder that I missed. Okay, with this one done, I'm going to turn my attention to the plume on the head. And for this color we're going to use another contrast color by Citadel called not Rider Red. Oh, this one. Contrast Blood Angels Red. Again, we apply it undiluted. This is a very vibrant color. I really like it. Oops. Over here. You can see the plume comes to life with this one. I'm going to use the same color with this one for the cape that he's wearing. Come back over here. As well, of course, behind him as well. Fell a little bit here. Go. Gives you a good idea how to paint this color. Make sure that it pulls in the recesses. you go. Now for the armor, I'm going to paint it in another contrast paint called something that I've never used before. We'll see how this one turns out. Called Snakebite Leather. Give it a good shake. We can start from the side here. Has a brown, reddish brownish color going up over here, and in the back it's almost a little bit of like a sepia color here. And you can use this one for the leather armor here on the shoe, on his kind of like shoes, or not gauntlets, but kind of like the armor he is wearing here on the shoes, as well, on the feet. That's the word I was looking for. Going back over here, as well as his inside torso armor as well. Can be a bit fiddly, but once you get a hang of it, you'll do really well. And because we primed it in white, you can actually see which parts of the model you actually missed. Going around. For the final part, we are going to paint the eye sockets, and we're going to paint them pure black from Vallejo in conjunction with the card art. This can be a little bit fiddly. Something like this. Any mistakes you can't make on the way, you can correct. And we're going to correct the mistake immediately by painting some Retributor armor gold on the front of the helmet here. As well as the shield. Now that looks quite okay. Now we're going to leave this one aside. With this, the Victorious Swordsman leaving to dry, we are going to turn our attention to the highlight stage of Argentus the Wizard. And as we can see here, it looks quite okay. If you want to leave it like this, you can actually leave it like that and just paint it with the base and seal it with some varnish, and that's it. But I'm going to do some dry brushing on the cloak, and the dry brush I'm going to use is using some white grey from Vallejo. And dry brushing is a great technique to use if you're a bit lazy and you don't want to highlight a lot, but you still want it to look a little bit better on the tabletop. Check out my video for dry brushing on the channel if you haven't done so already. And we're going to dry brush the cloak, the hair. Try not to touch. Oops. See if we can raise this camera a little bit. See if we can raise the camera a little bit before it falls down again. in dry brush the entire figure, except for the, of course, the brown parts here, with this color. And looks quite okay. Now we're going to put some highlights on the staff as well as the sword. And for the sword, we're using something called Chainmail Silver from Vallejo Game Colors. We're using it undiluted. And for this one, I'm using a size 2 cotton brush. Let's see if you can see that here. Yep, size 2. Painting the blade, the handle and the pommel. Same thing goes on the other side. Here you can also paint the end of the scabbard with this color. They were also usually painted, also made with a metal part here, as well as some small details on the scabbard. You can also paint this silverish here that he has in his forehead. So we don't miss that. As well as the things holding the organ plate, which we will paint in a few seconds. Next stage. This orb can be painted, of course, pure white, according to the card art. But I'm going to paint in a slightly different color, deviate with my original plan to give it a little bit more highlight. As well as the sword belt, the belt buckle here, as well as small parts of this bracelet here. Oh, not necklace, that's the word. Alright, and let's turn our attention to the staff. The staff will be painted in a brown color called Mournfang Brown by Citadel, undiluted. Here I made some mistakes, and that now it's very careful not to actually cover any of the white areas we've covered before. You can leave some of it the original color, so give it some highlights, give it some shadows. You can also paint this one with the sword scabbard. You can also leave it as it is if you want to. Gives it a little bit different look. You can also do that with the same thing with the belt. To make sure that it stands out a little bit more. As well as the top necklace, or necklace leather holding chain there. Now this one done, you can also put some small highlights on the shoes, especially the buckles holding the shoes together was what I think they are. Now looks quite good, alright. Now I'm going to paint the face or facial details. Very small highlight. This is entirely optional, and for this I'm going to use a colour called either Cadian Flesh from Citadel, or you can also use this color called Flat Flesh from Vallejo. Give it a good shake. Apply it undiluted on selected parts of the face. So I think a good face can really make the figure stand out, such as the nose, cheekbones, and knuckles on the fingers. You can also dry brush this one onto if you want to. Something like this. I like his eyes very dark here because I want it to be like really focused. Now let's turn our attention to the orb, and for this color I'm using something called Citadel's Aethermatic Blue. Undiluted, it's a contrast color. I'll show you exactly what my intention for this hero for this one was. Aethermatic blue will make it really shine like an orb. You can also leave it white if you want to. Something like this. Well, that's Argentus, he's done. And you can leave him to dry. Moving on to Horan, who needs his armor improved. Looks quite scary now, to be honest, but I want him to be polished a little bit more in silver, so I'm going to dry brush him with some silver. Using the same dry brush technique as I did before, but this time I'm using Chainmail silver. And I'm turning my attention here to the frontal armor, where all the light will go, as well as his shoulder pads. And helmet. That's where I want the attention of the viewer to go, not the back, as well as the blade will be this one, this color as well. So this is a very focused highlight that doesn't give attention to the back at all. I want him to be, you can do it a little bit on the back if you want to, but not too much. And this one done, let's turn our attention to the blade of the axe, which will be dealt with an even silvery shine. And this one I'm going to paint only on the blades. This is pure silver. As you can see here, only the edge. As well as some selected parts of the armor. You can nudge it out here if it's too strong. Something like this. Now turn our attention to the darker parts, and I'm going to reapply some Rhinox hide here. Rhinox hide. Because there's been some mistakes here that we made with the armor. And now we can fix them. As you can see here, underneath here, I didn't paint it. So that can be fixed. Otherwise he's looking fairly okay. Quite scary. There's only one thing left to be done with him, and that is to paint his frontal, where the eyes are. And that means we are going to do that with some pure black. We're actually going to use Glossy black from Vallejo to do so, because I want it to really stand out. Something like this. Horan is now done. We turn our attention to Victorious again. We're going to apply some glossy black over here as well. Start with the eyes because I already have it on my brush. There we go. Now we're going to turn our attention to the rest of the figure. And it looks quite okay as it is already, but I want it to be a little bit better. So it's going to be one of the hardest miniatures to paint if you encounter it. Not super hard, but slightly more challenging. So, but we're going to apply some dry brushing techniques on the cape to make sure that it stands out a little bit more. For the dry brush, I've chosen Mephiston Red from Citadel. It's a fairly heavy dry brush. Don't forget the back. And it's designed to blend out and smooth out the edges. Okay, now for the gold, I'm going to apply another wash. And this is going to be a sepia wash, because the gold is something, and it's going to be kind of like a highlight wash. We apply it undiluted. And this kind of wash is a nice way of highlighting gold in metal armor in general, especially gold. And you will see that it really makes some of the details here shine. It also means that it doesn't really, they're not that bright as well. So it's a way to tone down the gold, which tends to be a very dominant color. You don't want it to pull too much, so you move it around with the brush. Make sure that you got that perfect coverage that you need. Now with this one done, let's turn our attention to the sword. The same thing there before, chainmail silver to, sorry about the bump there. Chainmail silver to the sword, not pure silver. We'll touch up some mistakes as we made before. And also here I will paint 2 daggers that he has on top here before, but not yet. Now let's turn our attention to the leathery parts, which can be a little bit tricky because I think it's looks a bit too much wash on it. This is red leather from Vallejo. I'm going to dry brush it onto Victoria's leather armor. We'll see how it turns out. It's a different color. But I think it does quite a good job. Same thing with the boots, which are actually sandals. But if you want to paint the inside skin color, you can do so. I'm not going to. See if you see this here. That's what it looks like after the dry brush. Now that some dry brush came on the skin, but that's fine because it's still quite leatherish, and some on the sword as well, and that can be remedied in a bit. Now the thing is, we're going to turn our attention to the skin. And we're going to use a very small brush that is fairly broken, size 1 brush, to actually give the skin a very small dry brush as well. And they can be quite difficult. I'm going to show you how. Same colour before, flat flesh. It's very subtle. Here you go. Now, I said before that there's going to be some silver details here, and I am going to add those details right now, because on the chest here he's actually having two daggers. Like this, and they can also cover up the sword, the mistakes we made here before. With this one. Now, Tori's looks quite okay now. I'm going to add some of these small details here. You don't have to if you don't want to, but I think it looks quite nice with adding these metal studs. A little bit too much paint, perhaps. And the only thing we've got left here now is to actually give the shield here some dry brush, which we will do with the same gold as we did before. We painted this before. Again, we're only painting. I'll do another dry brush with a little bit bigger brush. And we're painting these ones directly, so they are seen as the highlights of the face, kind of raised above the other non-highlighted areas. As well as the pommel over here. And we are done with Victorious. Now apply a basing material of your choice, seal the miniature with varnish, and you're good to go. Now let's actually view these ones all together next to each other. And there you have them. 3 figures in less than an hour for Karak the board game. And I'll return with the other 3 figures in a short while. If you like this video, please don't hesitate to share, like, share and subscribe. And I really appreciate it. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in Essen in less than 10 days. Let's put these ones over here so we can see them.